Behavioral and brain responsiveness to responses to verbal stimuli reveal transient periods of cognitive integration of the external world during sleep. And to get you in the mood, I'm gonna start with something that represents my generation, a TikTok. Yeah, there you go. So we're gonna talk about how the brain responses and processes information when an individual is asleep. And here you can see a sweet cat whose dreams are becoming true. All right, so dreams can become true, but let's dive into the paper that was published in Nature Neuroscience last month, I believe. And it's by Basar Turker and the gang, or like, actually it's Delphine's Odette's gang, I guess. They're all from ICM in Paris. And what they looked into was basically sleep and the reactivity to external stimuli while people were asleep. So usually, sleep is considered as like the disconnection from the environment and from the world around us. So they basically investigated how participants behaviorally respond to some cues. They did it in almost 50 participants, and they tested 27 with narcolepsy and 22 healthy volunteers. So narcolepsy, in case, just to remind you, is basically a not sure even if a disease, but it's basically people with narcolepsy present excessive daytime sleepiness, and they have like a very short REM sleep latency, so they can fall really quickly into those REM sleep phases. And they have a very high frequency of lucid dreams, meaning like a lucid dream is when you are conscious of the fact that you're dreaming. So and it's like a perfect or not perfect, but really good population to test this paradigm in, because they can fall asleep really quickly and have those different sleep phases. So all the participants had a lexical decision task to perform, and they needed to either frown or smile, depending on, the stimulus that they were hearing, because it was like the auditory stimulus. So the team looked at the contractions of the corrugator or the zygomatic muscles, so frowning or smiling. And and what the main thing that they found out was that the responses, first of all, the responses were more frequent if there were stimuli presented during all sleep phases, basically. The main message here is that all of the participants showed transient windows of reactivity in all the sleep phases. But we can dive a little bit more into how they actually measured it and what they did. So first they're giving some background information on what has been done. And basically this kind of reactivity study has not been done in all the sleep phases. So people were trying, groups have been investigating the N1 sleep phase. So there is N1, N2, N3, and REM sleep, which is basically how deep asleep a person is. And behavioral responsiveness has been investigated in N1 sleep, so where you're like in the onset of sleeping. Hi, Vale. But not in later sleep phases. And so when we look at the where are the figures? Oh yeah, let's take a look at the experimental design and what they actually did here. So basically, they used words and pseudo words, and depending on the stimulus type, so either word or pseudo word, the participants had to either frown 3 times or smile like 3 times, so the muscle got contracted, and it was only, so the responses were only valid if it happened 3 times. So basically, so to eliminate all the biases or just random face movements. And they also looked at so the sleep and wake stages, and like all the sleep stages, and those were constantly monitored by I think it's called polysomnography, which means that they included EEG signals, EOG signals, which is basically the eye movements, and EMG, facial muscles, into basically proving that participants were asleep. And the experimental design goes like this. So these are the people who had narcolepsy. They were able to take 5 naps from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And during each nap, they had those on and off periods of stimulation. So in the on period, it was during 1 minute, they were hearing a stimulus, so either a word or a pseudo word, and they had to react. And at the end, they had to also report whether it was a dream, a lucid dream, and whether they could whether they were conscious of whether they could remember the words that they were hearing. So this was it. But for healthy participants, those were able to only take one single 100-minute nap, because you have to look into all the sleep stages. So this was basically the experimental design. And and here, so let's take a look at figure 2. I'm not sure if you can see the entire figure 2. This is basically an example of one participant with narcolepsy, and this is also one without narcolepsy, so a healthy participant and participant with narcolepsy during a lucid nap. So they basically look at all the signals that that would differ between wake phases and sleep phases, and right. And so you can see basically on the on some markers. So for example, EOG is the rapid eye movement, right? You can see like rapid eye movement being way more increased in the REM sleep phase of a lucid nap in narcolepsy patients compared to wake phase. And here on the last in the last row, you can see the trigger, so where the stimulus onset was. So in the wake phase, it's in both populations. You can see the trigger, so a stimulus, and then a response. So here with the EMG, right? And you can see that in the same manner here, for example, in the N2 sleep in healthy participants, and here again in REM sleep, but in a lucid REM sleep in participants with narcolepsy. So to look at the end results, or one of the end results, because they performed pretty like a lot of different analysis, and really like tried to prove and back up their study. So the end result is basically that sleepers, both sleepers, healthy participants and participants with narcolepsy, can process external stimuli at a high cognitive level, and also behaviorally respond to them across most of the sleep stages. The one sleep stage that healthy participants could not respond in was the REM sleep. So that's why you can see here, you can see, for example, their accuracy and responsiveness in healthy participants. So the left row is healthy participants, and the right part is narcolepsy participants. And so first of all, let's take a look at the figure A. The thing that you can see here is basically the response rate during all stages, where where you have like a on and off. Is there something? Probably my time is over. I can't see you guys. But let me just know, Lilith. But yeah, I'm coming to an end here. So basically, all the response rates during all sleep stages were higher at on stimulation period compared to the off stimulation period, and they were all significantly significantly different. So off compared to on. And the accuracy, so just taken together, the accuracy is everywhere above chance, right? So this was, oops, I'm sorry. This was basically their main finding. And then also they, to back up their results, they looked at, so reaction times and responsiveness, finding out that lucidity is associated with longer reaction times and increased responsiveness. How they tried to explain it was that narcolepsy patients with lucid dreams had a higher response time because their attention was, there was a fight for attention between the dream and the stimulus that they were still perceiving from the outside world. But here you can see it on the graph. So like wake phases compared to N1 and 2 REM and REM lucid REM sleep phases. And an important thing to mention as one of the last things is that they also looked at local brain activations during those responsive trials. And so they check, for example, like I think they performed, I'm sorry, time frequency analysis. That was it. They performed a time frequency analysis here including 2 electrodes, and found out that basically for all sleep stages, if it was basically reflecting what it should reflect, so confirming that the participants were actually asleep and did undergo all of these different sleep stages. Right, and here it shows basically the responsiveness again in all the pre-stimulus and post-stimulus responsiveness, and you can see with the post-stimulus responsiveness, like it's always almost always higher. So there was a processing of the stimulus. What they also did was looking at EEG markers of high cognitive states that predict responsiveness. They performed a bunch of complicated analysis, as well as like random forests analysis, finding out that there were like the EEG markers that they recorded were actually predicting or showing that people were in high cognitive states before a stimulus was presented, or when the stimulus was presented and they responded to it. And and then they also lastly looked at lucid dreamers and showed that basically there is also conscious processing of stimuli in lucid dreamers, but as I mentioned before, it takes longer for lucid dreamers, so the reaction times are increased because the stimulus that is perceived is competing for attention. So this is basically what they found out. And right, and then coming to the discussion, we can actually skip that, I believe, and then discuss a little bit what we think of it. So first of all, that's the main message, that that healthy participants and participants with narcolepsy have actually those transient windows of sensory connection to the outside world and outside stimuli, during which they can process information on a high cognitive level, and most importantly, they can respond to it physically, so by smiling and frowning. And this has been until now only demonstrated, like before, in lucid dreamers, like lucid REM sleeps. They talk a lot about limitations as well. For example, so one of the limitations is that they looked into so how they assessed the data was by visual inspection of the corrugator and the zygomatic muscles. They did it visually and without like an automatic processing, because they said with processing it automatically, you need a threshold, which would be arbitrary, and there is no like a golden standard threshold. So they did that, but there were like other blinded researchers who confirmed that. So they checked for that it's like not subjective. Another limitation is that all the participants took only daytime naps, and it could be different in night, like at night, during nighttime naps. And also another thing was that the lucidity, or like whether a person had a lucid dream or not, was basically detected, or not detected, but here, let's take a look at the design again. So there were, it was checked by a subjective report and not like an objective measure. But then again, they looked a lot into, you know, the EEG markers, all the local brain activations, and kind of backed it up with that. So let me know what you think about it and what kind of thoughts you have, whether you have any questions. I know I just covered it very briefly, but it's a cool study with limitations, but there's no such thing as a perfect study, I guess. So what do you think, where that could bring us, or what is the value of this?
Thank you, Anna, for presenting this paper. Super interesting. Are there questions? Yeah, Eva, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if they mentioned why they chose auditory stimulus instead of maybe smelling something like in your cat video.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. I thought that could be maybe something for the future, to have also different different stimuli. I think auditory stimuli were just the easiest way, right? I guess olfactory stimuli would be something to check that for follow-up. But yeah, I don't know. They probably explain it somewhere, but I can't answer. You have to look into the paper.
But it doesn't have to do with the like higher cognitive function that they were trying to look into. That could be done the same with olfactory.
I am not sure. I can't answer.
Okay.
You can also, because a higher cognitive function can also be, you can also process information, olfactory information, in a higher cognitive state, right? Like it can
distinguish between two, for instance, or
go again. Sorry.
Distinguish between two different smells or something.
Right. Maybe that's exactly. Maybe that's also something that is less. I guess maybe it's also more difficult to assess in objectively in a variety of people, because like auditory stimulation is something that is more standardized, I guess, and then you can or you can test it before how loud, or like that's what actually what they did. They looked into how loud they should individually, for each individual, how loud they should present the stimuli. And I guess with olfactory stimuli, that would be a little bit more difficult to assess. I think this is like the easiest way to present a stimulus while somebody is asleep. But yeah, it could be super interesting to actually check it with olfactory stimuli as well, but probably that's a little bit more of a hassle, I can imagine.
Thank you.
Next is Eduardo.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. Just one observation before. I think that studies on olfactory stimulation during sleep already exist, and notably people trying to test whether those kind of stimuli can be incorporated in dreams. But again, I have to check. But if you're interested, you can check the literature. I think something exists. But my question was, it's, maybe I didn't understand correctly, but so the subject were engaged in a lexical decision task during sleep, basically.
Go again?
The subjects were engaged in a lexical decision task during sleep. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
That's how did they do that? I mean, if people were asleep and they requested like 3 times contraction muscles to.
Well, this is what the study is about, right? That you can actually reach somebody. Also, they were instructed, obviously, before, right? They were instructed to, depending on the stimulus, to either, frown or smile 3 times, and well, that was basically, they had like a trials in the wake phase. That's how they contrasted, the trials in the wake phase and all the sleep phases or the sleep stages. Yeah, that's basically what the study is about, that you can actually by an auditory stimulating or sending an auditory stimulus, you can actually reach a person who is asleep. And I mean, that has been already possible, with like learning related cues in sleep, and there are like therapies for decreasing smoking because of stuff that you do in sleep. I didn't dive too much into that, but there have been already attempts, a lot of attempts, to reach people who are asleep, to reach them and like modulate their behavior in the wake phase. So yeah, that's what the study is about, essentially.
Yeah, because I was surprised that they could do that also in deeper phase of sleep.
Yeah, like that's why it got, I guess, into Nature Neuroscience, because it's like one of the first, actually the first study that managed to do that in later sleep phases in healthy participants. Because in narcolepsy participants, they are known to be more conscious of, and not conscious of their sleep, but they're like more, you can reach them, I guess, easier, also with like lucid REM sleep, and so on. So until this study, it has been only shown, like conscious processing during sleep has been only shown in the onset sleep, so in the N1 phase, and in the REM sleep in lucid dreamers, but not in those stages that they actually showed in that study. So you have here the N2. Hold on, maybe I can.
Already N2 is quite deep, so.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, yeah, maybe we can check. Hello. So basically, and how they backed it up was to look at all these channels of EEG and EOG and EMG, and they actually that's the novelty of the study, and what got me so excited as well, because that opens up basically, and that's how they argue, or what they argue, what they say as well. It opens up basically new doors of communicating with sleepers, and perhaps making therapies better, and just understanding how the phases of stages of sleep way better. I hope that answers your question to some extent.
Yeah, it's more curiosity, but yeah, thank you.
Erwin, you're the next one.
Yes. Thanks, Anna, for the presentation. Just to follow up on this article, I was wondering if they did asking about the consciousness, awareness, did they check after the task, or did they do debriefing after doing these different lexical tests to check if the subjects were conscious or got conscious of them doing the task if they remember the task, for example, did for example memory task after these things to check if there is any kind of correlation between consciousness and the way they do the task and stuff like that?
They did. I didn't go that deep into it because I didn't have the time. But here, so at the end of each of the naps and each of the of each of the trials, I guess you'd call it here, they asked the participants whether they were dreaming, whether it was a lucid dream, or whether they can recall words that they heard during the task. So they actually looked into it, and there is a figure about it as well, but I didn't explain you the figure. I think this was actually it. So you have all naps. I think it's okay. So this is for the patients with narcolepsy. You had all naps. You had naps where you got a response, like a physical response from the participants. Then they were asked, so only the ones that were like valid were counted. Then they asked whether it was a lucid dream, whether it was a non-lucid dream, or whether it was ambiguous. And if it was a lucid, and then they looked again whether if the participant said it was a lucid dream, what the recall was, and what like no recall was of like behavioral responses. And then again, non-lucid, recall, no recall. So basically the ones that are here, the squares that are bold, they show what like they are in line in what the participants recorded. So if they say it was lucid, then of course like you may think that the recall will be increased. So here the recall is indeed increased. If it's non-lucid, then you would expect that probably there's like less recall, right? So 84% no recall. And
so they ask them directly to, how can I say, they didn't test it, so they ask them if they remember. They didn't test it with some kind of unconsciousness. They did. Okay.
They did. They asked them for a subjective report, and they also tested it. So they looked into, let me check. I think this is stays computed. I'm not sure where the figure is at the moment, but they looked at all these markers, you know, the EEG, the local brain activations, and they were in line in what the subjective answer and reports of the participants were. So they looked at the sleep stages and backed it up with, like, for each sleep stage, they backed it up with all these neuronal recordings, basically, that they did. And all the markers like EMG, EOG, EEG markers, and they were in line of, like, significantly in line to what the participants recorded having a lucid dream or non-lucid dream. That's why they were able to do the analysis, like the lucid dream analysis, which is here somewhere at the end, but I didn't go too much into it. So yeah. So they tried to back it up.
So yes, when you say it's in line, so you mean that when they do when they, for example, for one word, when they do the distinction between the pseudo word and word, if they do the distinction, if they reply, does that mean they will remember more efficiently this word or not after the task?
If they reply, if they will remember it more efficiently. So they didn't do any memory test, I believe.
Because I would think that if the subjects reply to one specific word, he will maybe unconsciously will remember it. So I was asking if they did something like that to test it.
I believe.
But maybe not. Maybe they didn't do it. But
Going through the paper, I think they asked to the participants if they remember any stimuli.
Yeah, but it's asking them. So sometimes, yeah, it's not really testing the brain because you can say no, but the brain remember.
Yeah. That's the only thing I can find about remembering in the paper.
In the first figure, doesn't it say they do old new forced choice task?
Yeah,
So-
this is something unrelated though. So
okay.
yeah, this was something that they did afterwards. But yeah, old new task. Probably they actually tested it, but this is not reported in this article.
Okay.
So maybe they are publishing something else on that as well.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.
All right. Anna, thank you again. But can I ask a very quick question?
Sure.
Very quick. So, did they discuss anything about if they can apply these methods in patients with coma, for example?
No, not as I remember, like nothing about coma. But because, well, actually, it's an interesting question because you're still conscious, right? Or you can be conscious during
Yeah,
the
because
coma.
there can be different levels of coma, and
Yeah.
I was wondering if somehow you'll find some indicators in patients who can in people who can afterwards like do some report about the task.
Yeah.
And then you can maybe try to apply it to patients with coma. I don't know.
That could be actually a good application. Yeah, good idea. I don't know. I don't think they actually talked about patients patients who are in coma, but they talked about sleepwalkers in their discussion, which is
Okay.
also quite interesting because, like, if you're sleepwalking, then you also your brain responses are still as in like REM sleep, for example, but you have physical, like you're physically moving, right? Like you have physical reactivity towards external stimuli, and you're like still processing external stimuli to a very high level. But yeah, this was something that they discussed as well, which was quite interesting, but we didn't have the time, unfortunately, to dive into it. But that's why you can read the paper.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. We are ahead of time, but yeah, it was super interesting, this paper and the discussion, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. And well, see you next week. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye. See you next week. Have an exciting weekend.